it got interrupted. Sorry. I forgot what I were, but sleep and optimizing day. Yeah, the ugly part that when I was finished sort of at, I think, 1:30 instead of 18, or sorry, at 6 o'clock, which is like, that's 4.5 hours. And I think partly because I've become more effective in my studying, and also because I've become I left one part out, and I also become, which is sort of reflecting more deeply on some issues, but I think that's something I want to incorporate in another way than I usually do. So that's maybe half an hour too. But but the ugly part again is that when I'm finished that early, I feel the urge to, then it's like, then I have to work even longer, because I feel an obligation to work until 18, because I felt like that it's not discipline to not do it, and I felt somewhat demotivated thinking about it. There was no reward really, and on top of that, I've been sort of skeptical of. Sometimes when I feel bad, I have a sort of rule that goes in my head, and which is sort of like, you're not really optimizing for your own well-being. What you optimize for is the well-being of society, and if I do that, I actually feel better about myself sometimes. But the sort of flip side of that is that when you think that you're not doing something for yourself, you become more reluctant to reward yourself, or I become more reluctant, and I feel more an obligation to push through when something is hard, which is good usually, but it's a question of rewarding yourself, because rewarding yourself makes you, it's a way to stuck your habit, and it's something that Charlotte Munger thinks is good usually. And so, but I ultimately I know the value of contemplating things. I talk about default mode and so forth, and I know the value of downtime really, and not, as I've said, letting guilt guide you too much of what you should do. You should do rational decisions of what you should do, and if it's the right thing, then you should do it. But since I did that, and I did the usual studies, which so when the time was 13:30 when I had, or 1:30 when I had done sort of mandatory economic academic models, which is after all other things I do. So then I had which could have been 2 o'clock, but then I did some other stuff, which is sort of made me, since the time was so early, it was excess things that, one of them could have been sort of in something that could do for 10 to 15 minutes, but a day. But this time and actually, to be honest, the other thing which I also, it's not quite fair to say that I was finished that early, so that's probably why, because the other things was also things that I usually do actually before 6, and when I was finished with them, the clock was probably what time is it now? Then the time was probably 3:30 or something like that. But then I had also taken a shower for half an hour, maybe 20 minutes. And why am I harping on this time things? Well, I'm trying to optimize my day, and when I'm thinking about it, I actually don't think I have a really good explanation for why I'm doing it. I think that I want to optimize my day so much so that, because that's a common theme the last week when I've been studying these academic models. I want to be more and more effective in learning these things, which actually been the case one day, and I could have done it other days too, but I optimized for somewhat our other things. But anyway, one day I did 2 chapters actually. It's actually a week ago, and I considered doing that again today, but I realized that, but I'm not sure why I didn't do it. I could have done it, but I also guess that I was, one thing could just be simple pain avoiding. I just didn't felt as it doing it, but it could also have been, well, I think it was that I felt that the coming chapters, it was better to make sure that, because the coming chapters are somewhat more difficult. It's not as I've not read them before in this book, and I just flip the pages sort of, and I wanted to be even more like this iterative learning, as I spoke of, going over a chapter multiple times, but more time every time really makes you, if you do it in short passages every day, it gets easier to melt, and you in total don't have to put as much effort in learning it really. So that's it's interesting. I can't really follow my thoughts. What I mean is that I don't really know why I'm thinking what I'm thinking. Meaning, I'm just reasoning along. Like, for example, now with iterative learning, why did I mention that? One explanation is that I'm tired, but the other one is actually interesting to think about what you think about, because that's the only way how you can correct your thinking. So in this, I just said why I didn't do that extra chapter, and that was, well, it's probably a good thought, because it was, I really get to the bottom of if it was a good decision or bad decision, and that's a good thing to do really. So not doing that extra chapter was probably a good thing, because I had to stay prepared and stick with the general way of learning, which is you have to sort of know what's coming and through, that usual thing. And so, but anyway, I managed to, so a goal has really been, I imagine, yesterday and the day before that, to really make learning as effective as possible. And when I'm making it more and more and more effective, I can really be finished earlier in the day, because I'm more effective during the day when doing so that's, for example, why iterative learning is so easy. Because when I've already glimpsed on the chapter, which doesn't really have to take that much time, then it's really easy for me to just read through really fast. I mean, really fast, actually. Speed reading, not even reading deeply about it. I already sort of understand it. I can just read fast, and it usually takes, depending on the chapter and how well I know it, but sometimes I work in 25 minutes sort of chunks, and usually it can take, maximum I think was 17 minutes. That was the sort of best. So the whole sort of learning session, when I'm really about to learn this chapter, which is not really the case because I've already glimpsed on it, and lots of times, so I sort of already know everything. But it's just it's actually just seeing if you have missed something, and then afterwards, and at the same time as you repeat everything, and then afterwards I take a break for 5 minutes, and then I repeat the whole chapter, which usually take 10 minutes, and I even, and in addition to that, I sometimes speculated for 15 minutes, and that was the application part, or the reflection part that I cut out today when I did, for example, because I think I want to do it in another way, because when I do that, I don't see how the value is only value if I can use that reflection, because when I repeat the day after that day, or 3 days after that, or 1 week after that, or a month after that, I usually, then I don't know exactly what my reasoning was, and I'm not sure how I should it. And since I repeat sort of a lot of things every day, like the chapter yesterday, the chapter 3 days ago, and the chapter for a week ago, then it becomes quite much to also repeat all the speculation or associations that was not part of the original learning. It could be that it is a good thing to do, but I'm not sure yet, and that's probably why I don't do it, because it feels heavy to do. It could be that it's a good thing to do, but I'm not decided that that's the way I should do it. I'm still sort of speculating, or not sure how I should do applying the knowledge. And another thing is also that I want to push through faster and really learn the basic key ideas and not all the details. But it's sort of the same coin, because if you learn the most important things, usually the reason you do that is because you want more time for speculation. And so, I'm not sure if I'm optimizing in the right way, but it could be, like, for example, and that's one of those things that I had time to do today too, which was repeating sort of a summary, even though what I'm already doing is sort of a summary of every chapter. It was sort of a short summary, which basically takes, if I'm sharp, I don't think it takes more than 1 minute to go through, say 9, 10, I actually did 11 chapters, or not 1 minute, 2 minutes maybe, to do 11 chapters in my brain, just the basic key ideas, and that's what I wanted to do. And I started to do that yesterday, and I memorized stuff, and today I repeated that, and so that's, I don't want to get stuck up in things that takes a lot of time that I'm not sure is valuable. I guess that's the thing, because it would be like an extra 45 minutes every day to repeat or speculate as much as I did on the original sessions. So but this is a lot of details, and I'm not sure how to think about it. Maybe I think it's good things to think about, but the question is now really what I should use the time for, and like, for example, now I have some spare time, and I could have done. That's one thing I could think about. Should I have continued to study? I don't think I should have continued to study like with short breaks. A break with 1/2 an hour could maybe have been suitable, because you get more and more tired in the brain, and I'm not sure, like, this side of sort of reasoning here is for part of that, but I think I'm going to sit, but so what I'm thinking about, again, going back to pleasures, and how should you optimize for? How should I really optimize for? Um, should I optimize for even for pleasure? And in a sense, I think I learn better when I do, and usually this nootropic that I'm on makes me happier as long as I don't sleep bad, and as long as I think that's the main thing. And I also see that I'm usually not as motivated, or usually I am more negative when I'm tired. When I'm tired, I usually feel worse. Like, for example, today you could argue, but considering how little I sleep, like for me 8 hours is quite little, to be honest. It's really, and I actually didn't even sleep 8 hours. I had difficulty to get to sleep because I had too hot in the room. I hadn't planned that well enough. And in addition to that, as I said, I really can feel the consequences of not sleeping. But yeah, in addition to that, I'm not sure. I didn't sleep really that well on the later during the night. So again, I'm losing my track of thought here, but train my train of thought. But yeah, optimizing for well-being and so forth. Because the thing is that I want to do the academic models, but the reward for those are not obvious, or they are not instant. And I usually think that in order for me to know what to do in life and in general things, what I want to make things better in general, but and I have some ideas about that, and I've spoken about it a lot from time to time. Like, for example, education is one thing, but ultimately this big question of motivation in society and education, and really how the absence of a religion has left a void. This is grand thinking, but I'm not. Just follow me here. And usually, to make sense of the world, people adopt worldviews that in some sense are congruent with each other. They are at least, in some sense. So religion serves a purpose in some sense. It is not. I don't say it's necessary for a society, but it's facilitates a lot, and among other things, cooperation and cooperation. It's not to say that religion is the only thing that can do that, but it's usually what's been the most useful thing, or that's the thing that has been used. That's the way to put it. And one reasoning is that political ideologies was the only thing that could fill that void. I'm not sure, I can't say if I'm right on to that 100%, but it seems somewhat reasonable. At least I think there has to be something to fill that, or if not going back to religions in themselves. I'm not the one to know what's right here, but in general, I think a vision for society is crucial, and I think building that vision, however little, small or large part I can play in that, I think is crucial for people to feel motivation. And that's really something that I agree with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. They both speak about the future and imagining the future, and the absence of that is what is the most deformed thing in society today. I really think that that's the case. And so the question then becomes, how do I do that, and how am I as rational as possible in that? And I've been influenced a lot by Charlie Munger in these academic models and so forth. And to be honest, there is something in me that, in this instant, there is a feeling. I'm not saying that I think this is the sense, but or the thing is right, but there is a doubt in me that the academic models are not what will solve this. That's the sense. It's not that what I think is true, but there is some skeptical element. I'm thinking sort of, will I really get more insightful if I learn them? And don't I already know a lot? And that's probably, when I think that, when I say it, it becomes, it's sort of the definition of ignorance to think that. So I do think I have some insight in some topics for sure, and I can't say how important or illuminating or original my thoughts are. It's hard to say, or how true and how impactful, but yeah, learn them the most basic key ideas is probably really important. Also to question them for sure, like and because that's a common theme in, like, for example, both Charlie Munger, Peter Thiel, and even Peter Thiel's companion Eric Weinstein. I think I can't speak for him, but I think he will agree. Both Peter Thiel and Charlie Munger, which I think sometimes as I both look up to them and think of them as sound inspiration. It's really hard to find competent people, and really competent, and so I it's really hard to evaluate how right they are and so forth. It's really, really hard. But anyway, I look up to them, and usually, and sometimes they seem divided on some things. Like, for example, the Munger approach is more relaxed and careful, and not as visionary bold as Peter Thiel, while he claims being more rational. And that's probably the reason for why Peter Thiel, and this is sort of the most distinguishing part in their in how they are not alike, which is that Peter Thiel sees himself as a Christian, while Charlie Munger seems to be somewhat skeptical to religion, even though he says that it serves some good functions, or has at least. But he's never, he's not that explicit about it really, but it's hard to, so I don't know about him really, but that anyway, it's hard to describe that in a fair way, the way I wanted to, but the thing is, they both agree on something. Like, for example, this economics book claims that it's usually the free market thing, that everyone is better off, and so on and so forth. And the arguments against, which are, some of them are bad and some of them are good, and some of them are done in not so admirable interests, and some of them are really true and accurate. That's my opinion, and I think Peter Thiel would agree and Charlotte Munger would agree. But it seems as if the author here, even though he's insightful in some, I'm not going to diminish him. He's probably the best, maybe the most insightful economics textbook, but he seems to be somewhat too rigidly a free marketeer, in the sense that he's relying so strongly on the models so that he don't question the assumptions. Like, for example, the assumption of being rational, that people are rational. Not being rational, it's good to be rational, but that people make rational decisions. And that's one thing I've been thinking about a lot for myself, and I think I even mentioned it here, that the concept of consumer surplus and producer surplus is really is good if you is really a good way of thinking about it if everyone took decisions on their own that maximize welfare, that they bought things that were good for them, but because there are so many things that are bought that are not good for people, and I will actually claim that there's a lot of those things. There's also a lot of things that are really good and really, so it's really hard to think about. And I'm not saying Peter Thiel and Charlotte Munger agrees with this totally, but I think they are more skeptical to the overall, like, for example, free trade between countries, that there is no side consequences, or that there is no reasons for restricting, not restricting, but it's not obvious what the responses should be, but to contemplate the negative consequences. That is the thing that is not done sufficiently, I think. It could still be that free trade is the thing. Like, for example, Charlotte Munger talks about the second order consequences of Ricardo's comparative advantage. The first order consequences are really good and for free trade. But the second thing is that if two countries are doing this, yes, everyone in total is better off. But you have to deal with the fact that one country opening for that might be the superior US now, but when opening trading borders, trading, in the long run you will be outrun. So you will not be the number one, you will be the number two if you allow for trade, which does make everyone better off. It does make you better off, but it also makes the other one better than you. And that's not to say that it's wrong to open for trade, but not contemplating those things are important, I think. And the other thing is, I'm not sure why I brought this up, but it was, in relation to this textbook. It's the same thing as when I read the courses in Stockholm School of Economics. I felt as if the assumptions was not justified enough. It was a good way to think, but the implications was not brought up, or the consequences and the assumptions, the potential consequences of the assumptions being wrong, or the potential that they are wrong. That was something I struggled with quite much, and one of those being that not every transaction is good for you, but it also made me more appreciate that the fact that if we are rational in our consumption decisions, then it's a really good way to justify that open markets are enormously good. It just incredibly good way and beautiful, really a beautiful theory that is laid forth in the books. But So that's one. So I guess the answer to myself would be, if I feel skeptical about academic models, yes, have that skeptical mind, continue to have it, remain skeptical, but that is not an argument to not know them. You can't really disqualify something unless you know it, and you better have quite good reasons for disqualifying something that the brightest minds in our civilization have pondered and come up with. So yes, learn them, but as always, remain skeptical. A healthy skepticism, for sure. So, and yeah. So, and I think that's important for me to think about. Yeah. Another thing that I think is really good for me to do, and this is really important, I think, and it is really an astounding idea, really important. So I had to state it fast so I don't get stuck up in details and so forth. And so my original thought that is so impactful and important is that it's a lot of thoughts attached to this, so it might not seem as bright or as easy to understand. Anyway, the statement is that the difficulties or the not feeling that well, not feeling entirely motivated, or somewhat not far from depressed, but somewhat down, or feeling, well, this is not, that's gray is the right way, feeling this gray feeling of life. That is, I often do when I'm not sleeping enough. It's not that bad, it's just somewhat more, it's not that fun, really. And when that happens, and the reason it happens, and the cure, and a cure for that, it's a long statement, but the cure for that is, that's really the statement, that the cure that will make me happier and more motivated is the same thing that will make it easier to learn. And that's really essential to connect. And it really connects to a lot of thoughts I've had earlier about sort of the DM mode, default mode in brain, sort of processing, not only like processing yourself, you taking of it yourself, and it goes hand in hand. I'm trying to just, sometimes I say, to get a bridge from learning, just like mundane repetition learning, to my overall experiences and thoughts. And sometimes I bridge, and sometimes I think about it that I want to erase the distinction between them, because it's really the same thing. And it's sort of related to this, that in order to make learning fun, maybe some routinized things cannot be made entirely fun, but if I can get some things, like for example these times, later times during the day, if I can get some of these things, like for example this, what I'm doing right now is a part of that, to connect my motivations, what I'm thinking interesting, with the academic models. Really, I could contemplate the academic models, which is somewhat hard sometimes, but it is like the justification for learning the models and the use of them. That's really what it's all about. That's what so I have a justification why I should learn, but it's not as clear for me when I am studying. And I think I have it most clearer what the connection is to my ultimate motivations. Like, why am I learning this? That's really the thing. I probably should take for a habit to every time if it's in the morning or if it's in every time I start to study academic models, not every session maybe, but when I start that period during my day, which is a bit between 1 to 4 hours maybe right now. Then before starting that period, I should make clear for myself why I'm doing this. It's maybe not initially be easy to remind myself of that, even though I'll try. Maybe it's easier, but ultimately think about the things that I'm learning and making them connect. I'm tired, but I think there's a lot of to get here, but it's still hard to, because there is a lot of things that are pleasurable in life that are not useful in the long run. Like, for example, if I watch a movie or if I exercise. Like, exercise is something that I think I do it more because the endorphins are so strong than that it's healthy, or at least the amount I do it. It makes me more sharp immediately after and so forth. So I think I have a lot of like, there are lots of things I'm doing, like drinking coffee, eating food. Or food is, well, you have to eat food, but and the easiest way to, because I'm not trying to force reality to say that the most useful thing to study will also make me happy, but in some sense I think that there are effective processes for studying that are mundane somewhat, but I think to really get good at learning, I think the connection to the motivations will be better. I'm not sure that, like, the original thought is somewhat disappearing here, because I'm not sure how I justified that to be something pleasurable. Yeah, I think it's because, yeah, it's this type of reasoning, because this is something I think is interesting, and I usually get motivated when I do it, like reasoning about things and writing about things and thinking, and the motivation goes up when I do that. And it's really about short term and long term in a sense, because in the long term I know that it will be useful. But like, what I am trying to get at is that I know how it is to feel that something is really interesting. And like when I'm reading about some person, but usually, if I'm being honest, that's because I'm on sort of, maybe I've been drinking a cup of coffee, so I'm just motivated, or something like that. It's usually a drug involved, so it's not about it can be sometimes about the content for sure, but yeah, that's definitely true. But how do I make my brain understand that what I am learning is connected to immense pleasure. And is it really that? Is it like, that reminds me of something that the guy, I mentioned him before, Tai Lopez, said one time that if you're feeling demotivated and so forth, keep your eyes on the reward. And I guess that's the thing. The reward for me really is a positive impact. And if I can remind myself, even though in the short term I'm not sure, right now I don't get entirely motivated about just thinking about it, but well, if I think about it a little more, maybe I will be, because it is really what I am. Well, yeah. If society could be a motivating place to live in, where you can do lots of things just and strive towards extraordinary things, and you could make people live forever so they don't have to die, and eliminates lots of suffering and physical and psychological suffering, like that would be a world, and be a part of creating that with other people, competent people, that would be amazing. So yeah, that is my motivation really. But the side thing of this, is that I don't have a community with intelligent people that I can speak with. But I think that would be a good thing to have. But I'm somewhat, and this is hard to say, I'm quite skeptical and reserved I'm not sure I always appreciate other people's intelligence, and it could be a bad way of, they say you can always learn something from a person. Yeah, that's true, but it's also true that some people are very much more insightful than others. That's a hard truth. I don't know how I am, where I am on that scale, but usually I find that people are so stuck. It's not that they're not insightful, but I do think though that I'm somewhat original in being. I'm not sure I don't know how smart I am, but I think that I have an inclination that makes me more not fit perfectly in the conventional career paths. And I also think that a lot of people share with me that trait, but that trait usually makes you unsuccessful. And that's the reason why I could be a person among others who are still understands that and have a strong willingness to understand that aspect of reality, and can navigate towards eliminating that hurdle or that malfunctioning thing for society that a lot of people have to deal with. And that makes me that, but since most successful people or intelligent people in the usual sense are not struggling with that, I'm not saying that I have everything easy, but some intelligent people or successful people, or a lot of them, not everyone, but a lot of them are not. Well, I think I might be wrong here. I probably am wrong, but it's something really hard to grasp, because it's what I'm thinking about, and this is really similar to Munger. He says that people get cabbaged up in their minds in the usual education. They don't learn to, I don't know what it is, but they don't learn to be really insightful, I guess. It's just, they don't see the whole picture. They're not illuminated by the education is so narrow, and it's a side consequence of specialization. Like, for sure, it's better to be specialized, but if no one is coordinating the specialization, then and no one understands it, then you don't know what to specialize in, right? So you have to have an understanding for the non-specialization part in order to fit that into reality and to investigate it. And so I think the specialization part is not that good for us when we just force ourselves to ignore all the other academic departments or so forth, or the other models and so forth. So, and since so few people have a really multidisciplinary, deep, insightful approach and understanding of society because of the high specialization, even in really competent people, I think I have some level of intelligence at least to see that that's happening. And fortunate enough, even though more intelligent and smarter people might go for that I don't want to say easy part, but that sort of specialization, I can and for sure are doing a good job. I think the people who are good at solving the issues that I think are important or that I have an inclination of to be good at, those are not that many, and that's why I don't have social. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. I made there a connection between why my studies are mundane to Adam Smith, Invisible Hand. And it was not the usual, like stuffing things in your brain. It goes through that I don't have a community of multidisciplinary people. There are not that many people who are multidisciplinary and understand things good. And that's why it becomes mundane. Like, for example, if it's not the simple thing, well, that's one thing why it's mundane to study. Like, it's so specialized, so you don't get thrilled when you're reading it. That's one, but that's not the thing. That's the obvious connection between specialization, a la Adam Smith, and studying. But that's not the thing here. The thing is that what is demotivating for me in doing that is not necessarily the subject in itself, but it's the connection to other brighter minds to reason with, because we're so immensely deeply social human beings. So yeah. And so not specializing is, of course, you have to do that, I guess, to some degree, and there are large questions about what I want to do in my life, but it still goes back to, in order to make that decision, even though I could force it, not neglecting that, but still understanding and is what's to optimize for. And in order to do that, that's why I watched Charlie Munger's videos, for example, yesterday again. But I was still not that motivated, so it's still easier to get motivated to watch a movie, I guess. And that's and eat great food and so forth. So yeah, I guess that it's really a hard question about rewarding yourself and about pleasures. I mean, I look at Charlie Munger when he's a lot of business meeting. He's just eating a lot of that peanut brittle, I think it's called, and I'm thinking, and he's drinking Coke. I'm like, and Warren Buffett doesn't really eat broccoli and vegetables and don't care. I'm really thinking about, and that's why I've been experimenting about with that sometimes, to just let go of everything. Is it really that important? And that's what happened half a year ago when I studied 25 cognitive bias. I let go of everything. I stopped meditating. I stopped being on this product called Qualia, even though that, well, it was another product too. And that's, I go back and forth with that, but I stopped. I drank as much coffee as I wanted to. I like really much. I ate as much as I just wanted to do, and I not caring about that much about nutrition, even though I did eat some vegetables and so forth, but only like what I wanted to, what felt right, and so I don't care that much about food. I didn't care about exercise, even though I did exercise like twice a week, but other than that, I never, like, moving my body. I think I never went outside my apartment for a while, just several days in a row, just because I just didn't feel any reason for or yeah. And so there was a lot of things I just excluded and only did what I felt, not what felt good. I did read a lot, and I read Peter Buffett's, which is Warren Buffett's Child, a book which was very good. So because it dealt just with my situation and what to choose for life, and it's really about buying time, because you want to have time to decide that, and which is a reassuring reminder right now in my life. But anyway, I yeah, it's still about pleasures. How do you optimize for pleasures? If I should do that in some sense, or if that provides, because Munger and Buffett doesn't seem to, as long as they can study all the time, they don't seem to avoid some pleasures. And so it's really a hard thing to know what to reward myself with, because there's not that many things that just makes me happy immediately. Like TV series is something that I've been, and I also try to experiment with this qualia and doing eating healthier, and I'm still continuing that project, but it's not been that perfect, because at the same time I've been sort of cutting down on sleep somewhat, and I'm not I broke my sort of rule that I should not eat. Well, I should just limit some foods and not eat that too much, and so forth. So I'm really going back and forth on that, and I actually think that it's not a coincidence that I'm fasting right now and I'm talking about food, because I know, like, that my conviction that not caring about food too much and what to eat and not to eat, and not eating and fasting, that theory, which happened with Peter Buffett, I think it was the week before or after. Anyway, that came under a 4-hour fast. First time I fasted for 4 days, I think. I'm not sure it was 24 hours times 4, but close to. And so, and by the way, I did notice that after that, I think after that was when I was so hyper motivated and did 25 cognitive biases, learned everything. So I did notice that it seems to have some effect. And sometimes I've noticed that when I have fasted for a day, as I'm doing that right now, I feel extraordinary afterwards, the days after. I'm not sure that will happen today, but yeah. Yeah, so it's hard to evaluate. But this is a lot of thoughts, and it's interesting to talk about. So what can I get away from this video? I think I want to finish now. I just want to summarize in some sense, or think about what I can get away from this, because I usually want something to. It's good to train your mind to think accurately, but it's also very important to to use the conclusions. That's, for example, when I write something, instead of doing this video, sometimes I write and I read what I wrote yesterday to just sort of recapitulate and remind myself of, because you put a lot of time into getting those thoughts. So just reading is much more effective than just thinking about them again, without sort of getting from those thoughts to the next level. And so what can I take from here? I made a connection between pleasure and the reason why I don't feel pleasure when I'm studying, and the absence of a connection to really intelligent people and so forth. And you could also argue it's evolutionary, like civilization is as it is. We're not socially adapted or evolutionary adapted to this social setting, for sure. But it's also the dimension of finding people who are really competent and being around them, and also for sure make a living in some sense. But that's another topic. It's not. But anyway, so that's a connection I made. That's what I have to do. But I also now thought about pleasures in general, and if you could compensate for it by other things. But I really do want to do it. Like find the motivation or the interest in the subject when I'm dealing with it. And I guess that the Charlemagne approach, when I listened to someone who said that motivation was lacking, and yesterday he said something like, maybe I was very fortunate to be so interested. My problem seemed interesting to me, as he said, Charlemagne. And I think I have a part of that. It's also true that I have a sort of a, for example, when I'm studying, like for example, now I feel somewhat interested in it, for sure, even though I'm not on top. But that's probably because I'm fasting, and despite sleep, mostly sleep actually, I think fasting is not that bad really. When I am studying, and it's hard to remind myself, because usually when I'm studying, I know I'm studying because I have to stick with the plan and not derail. And I try to make a bridge between that sort of studying and deeper appreciation of the knowledge. But now I start to the bridge is not, well, that's probably the part I missed here, because connection to other people is not the only thing that has to be connected to studying. It's also your internal motivation, and oh no, I forgot what I was thinking. It's not only social, it's also pleasures in the form of, I don't want to miss this thought. Yes, the bridge to really interesting problems you have in your life. It's connected to this, really. That's, I think, what I'm trying to say. And it's not that it becomes extraordinarily interesting, but I think it can get quite interesting if I try to apply the models to my life and understand my circumstances better. That's really the thing. I think it can become quite interesting. more interesting than when I'm studying usually, to understand, to use the models and understand my circumstances. But yeah, it's hard, like for example, usually when I think about economics, I don't find the applicability immediately. I don't know exactly how to apply it to my life in this circumstance, sort of. But I guess the Charlemagne approach would be to say that, yeah, inversion is one thing he's using, but that's just a side note that I'm just having to think about. But to say that well, this is sort of an inversion. Instead of learning it, you say, what's the implication in my life, or from this book, what ideas can I get for understanding my life better, so that I can make better decisions? Usually there is a connection for sure, but it's more like the key ideas. It's not necessarily the details, maybe. So maybe I am, yeah, I don't know. Hard to say though. Like, I'm really going back and forth on this, how much I should, because it is somewhat demanding to force learn it, and I'm thinking about if I could just get the key, if I don't worry that much about the structure and just push through, which I actually did yesterday and today, push through and wrote down all the ideas, and then I started to memorize them. But maybe I shouldn't memorize as much. Memorize is not necessarily the most important thing. The most important thing is that I have written a really short summary with the key ideas, and maintaining that knowledge by reading it again for sure, so you keep the knowledge. That's sort of, or you keep the understanding. That's a sort of, but then if you do that faster, meaning if you summarize more well and pick out the key ideas instead of just all the details, then you can go faster to the mode of contemplating how they are applicable to your daily life. At the same time, you can do it while you're reading. That's something that I might need to think about more, but yeah, maybe that's an experiment I'll try today. Take that book again and not feeling as if I'm studying, just think about what ideas can I get from here that is important for my understanding of the world, really. Something like that. Anyway, I think I had to cut here, even though there's still a lot of things that I want to sort of get clearer on, but yeah, I guess I'm tired. See you next time.